You're driving home, ready to unwind, when suddenly flashing lights appear behind you. An officer pulls you over, walks up to your window, starts asking you a few questions, and then suddenly he pulls out the cuffs, he yanks you out of your car, and arrests you for a crime. A crime you didn't commit. The evidence? A social media photo, misidentifying you based upon AI-driven facial recognition technology. Sounds like a movie script, right? Well, unfortunately, it's a true story, and it's a nightmare for people like Randall Reed, Michael Oliver, and Robert Williams, and dozens of other people who were wrongfully arrested for this bad AI technology. I'm Jeff Hampton, former prosecutor turned people's lawyer, and I've seen bad evidence before. But this technology takes it to a terrifying level. In this video, I'm revealing how this flawed AI system of facial recognition software is ruining innocent lives and what you can do to protect yourself. Let's start with the basics. Facial recognition technology. It's everywhere, from unlocking your smartphone to speeding through airport security. The twist here is that police departments are now using the same AI to pull up images of people on social media to identify them and try to link them to a potential crime. In fact, police officers are routinely pulling images from social media platforms without those people's consent. Here's how it works. Police feed images, like a photo from your Instagram, into powerful databases that contain billions of pictures scraped from the internet. Companies like Clearview AI have built massive facial recognition systems by collecting over 30 billion photos from sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, and even YouTube. Once they find a match, it has been used by law enforcement to try to link a potential suspect to crimes ranging from shoplifting to assault. In some cases, this match becomes the sole basis for a warrant, even though it's been well established that this facial recognition technology is far from foolproof. Take Randall Reed. In November of 2022, he was pulled over for a traffic stop, and he was arrested supposedly for stealing designer handbags in Louisiana. The kicker? Randall had never even been to Louisiana. The entire arrest was based upon a supposed match or hit from a facial recognition software system. For 6 days, Randall sat in a jail, humiliated, scared, unsure how he was going to prove his innocence when he knew he had done nothing wrong. Even more terrifying, the actual warrant for Randall's arrest never even mentioned that the cops based all of their so-called probable cause off of an actual facial recognition software hit. Take a moment to think about that. Technology that was designed to be smart, accurate, and fair is now making life-altering mistakes. And unfortunately, the studies show that those mistakes tend to disproportionately affect people of color and women. In fact, let me show you how deep this problem runs. For example, Robert Williams, a black man in Detroit, was arrested for allegedly stealing $3,600 worth of watches. The evidence? A grainy surveillance photo supposedly matched to his driver's license photo through facial recognition technology. Here's the kicker. Robert had a rock-solid alibi. He was 50 miles away from the scene, and he was live streaming on Instagram at the time of the theft. Still, Robert ended up spending 30 hours in jail. Imagine the toll it has on your employment if you lose your job. Imagine the toll it has on your family, not to mention your mental health. Then there's Michael Oliver, who was misidentified and arrested for supposedly breaking someone's smartphone. And what about Niger Parks, who was wrongfully arrested for supposedly shoplifting snacks? And poor Niger, man, if you look at his case, one of the things you'll find, he even decided to plead guilty because he was afraid of what would happen if he took his case to trial. What do these cases all have in common? They were victims of facial recognition errors. This is happening in cities all over the United States. So why does this technology fail? Well, number one is bias in the algorithms. Studies have shown that most facial recognition software struggles to make identification and positive matches for people of color. Studies also show significantly higher false positive rates for Black, Asian, and Indigenous individuals. Number two, poor quality images. Very often, police officers will rely upon very low resolution or grainy photos as the basis to try to make a match. And not surprising, it's not reliable. Number three, human error. Even if AI makes a positive match, A human must actually review it and confirm whether or not it's true. And as many of us already know, humans are very bad at positively identifying unfamiliar faces. And number 4 is police over-rely on this technology. Look, cops could use so many other investigative tools here, other than just what a facial recognition result might give them, as a basis to confirm whether or not this is the right suspect or maybe they have the wrong guy. And if it isn't bad enough, here's where it gets much more troubling. There is virtually no oversight for police departments using this technology. The main reason is because police officers can use facial recognition software without ever getting a warrant. And it's quite simple. All they do is they go to social media platforms like Facebook or others. They'll take your photo, they'll feed it into a database, use it for whatever reason they want, and never tell you or the court. In fact, police departments admit to using this facial recognition software on everyone. Victims, witnesses, suspects, you name it. And here's the crazy part. According to the Georgetown Law Center of Privacy and Technology, the police have used someone liking a suspect's photo on Instagram as a, quote, basis to believe they are a witness to criminal activity. So now that we know cops are using this technology on everyone, the real big legal question here, is it reliable to be used against someone in court? The real problem with the reliability of facial recognition software is that it still relies upon the subjective opinion of a human being looking at what the software provides as a possible match and deciding whether it actually is a match. But wait, if the technology screws up, can't the investigator just double check it and make sure it's right? Unfortunately, it's not always that easy, because how reliable is a human being's subjective judgment in being able to determine whether or not there's an error? There is a wealth of overall psychology research out there that definitively shows that humans are just not very good at identifying unfamiliar faces. Here's the scary part. Error rates for facial recognition software technology range for as low as 10%, as high as over 60%. And there are several factors that play into the accuracy levels here. Number 1, the couple of things that are mentioned is the image quality. We talked about that a minute ago. If the image that's being compared into the database is not high quality, you're going to get a much lower probability of a result that's reliable. The next thing is the pose variability. Think about it. If someone's posed at one particular angle, it might look like someone else. So it depends on the angle of the person of the photo and who it's being compared to. Also talk about age between photographs or similar looking imposters. You might have one person that looks very similar to someone else, or the age differences can have a huge difference in the actual accuracy and the reliability of this being used in court. Now listen to this. In one early study of facial recognition software technology, error rates were as high as 30% when comparing high quality photos. So you had high quality photos to compare it to. You had videos where pose, expression, and the age of the subjects were all constants. They were all similar, and you're still looking at error rates of 30%. Now it's 30% error rates when you have high quality images and everybody's standing in the same pose. But what if you have a little bit different pose, or what if you have a lower image quality? Those error rates can easily double. But wait a minute, experienced cops must be better at identifying suspects than ordinary people, right? Think again. Studies have shown that experience with forensic face identification still is not enough to establish reliability. In fact, unless a police officer receives specific specialized training, officers are just as likely to misidentify someone as any other person out there. There was a study done back in 1999 where they actually took 20 police officers with an average of 13 and a half years of experience doing exactly this type of investigative work. And they showed them low quality images and tried to compare them to other people in order to make a suspect match. Here's what they found. They found, quote, that the officers performed as poorly as a group of college students unfamiliar with how the process works. So in other words, they did just as bad as college students did, and their experience and what they had spent out on the field for 13 and a half years did not help them in finding the right person. Okay, I've spent a ton of time talking about this technology is not reliable, but what about it being constitutional? Here, it poses an actual constitutional crisis. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. But when you talk about facial recognition software, it allows the police to conduct mass surveillance with zero zero accountability. It's not just suspects being targeted here. There are many cases where the police have actually flagged a bystander or a witness because they appeared in the background of a photo. Think about that for a second. Your privacy, your movements, all of your social media could be used against you without any of your knowledge, and you're completely innocent. So the question here is, how is it that police are able to legally get away with this? Notice the 3 cases that are on the screen right now. All 3 of these cases ruled that facial recognition software is not reliable enough to either convict someone or to exonerate someone. In fact, there's also nearly universal agreement that facial recognition software does not provide probable cause to either arrest you or to use the evidence gathered from it in court against you. In fact, the police claim that facial recognition software only generates investigative leads, not positive identifications. The problem? Law enforcement has been playing a game. On one side, they're claiming, oh, no. Facial recognition software is not being used to arrest or convict anyone. And in fact, we are very clear that it's not probable cause for an arrest. We're only stacking up investigative leads. But in practice, they are actually using these so-called investigative leads to establish probable cause by using very sketchy corroborating evidence to use it as a basis to arrest people and convict people potentially for crimes they did not commit. Now, wait a minute. In theory, allowing corroborating evidence along with the facial recognition software hit should be enough in order to stop any wrongful arrests or convictions, right? In reality, it doesn't always work that way. In fact, many times the so-called corroborating evidence that allows the cops to proceed forward is merely the same officer who ran the database search through the facial recognition software, and he turns around and looks at it and says, yeah, that's the same guy. So as a result, many people are still being arrested based upon facial recognition software hits alone. In fact, in a number of cases across multiple jurisdictions, people have found themselves arrested, sitting in jail, facing serious criminal charges based upon only a facial recognition software match with no other evidence listed in the police report to corroborate why the cops chose to identify this person. Now, police departments give assurances that this never happened. But in one of the instances where a man was wrongfully arrested and misidentified by facial recognition software, the actual facial recognition hit, the lead, was sent to the detective with the disclaimer at the top of it that said this, quote, "This document is not a positive identification. It is an investigation lead only and is not probable cause to arrest. Further investigation is needed to develop probable cause to arrest." So how can the police come up with this so-called corroborating evidence to allow people to still be arrested by facial recognition software? A classic example of this is the case of Robert Williams. In fact, Robert Williams was arrested in Detroit wrongfully in 2020 based upon a facial recognition software hit matched with a photo array. And then they showed it to a witness that was not even present at the scene at the time. My favorite, though, has to be the 2018 famous NYPD sock theft case. In that situation, the police thought they knew for sure who it was because there was a facial recognition software hit. It was a match that came back, and instead of doing what cops are supposed to do, which is to put up a photo array of multiple people to compare what this hit would be listed against other possible suspects, instead they sent one photo as a text with suggestive text to the witness underneath it, basically insinuating it had to be this guy because of the facial recognition software match. And of course, that was enough for them to corroborate that this particular guy should be arrested. Here's the worst part. Police departments are not keeping track on when and how often facial recognition software is being used to determine whether someone should be a suspect. So we've already identified several examples of widespread use where when it is being used, it's not always being used properly, and it's being used as the sole basis to investigate someone. So for all we know, this could be used in a widespread systemic practice of facial recognition software misidentifying people all over the country. I don't like people snooping on my social media. And if you're like me, you want ultimate privacy from the government and other bad actors when it comes to your data. This is precisely why I use NordVPN to provide me the ultimate solution to both privacy and security. One of the key benefits of partnering with NordVPN is that they actually make sure that your internet traffic is encrypted, ensuring that your sensitive data is safe from hackers and online snoops. Whether you're on public Wi-Fi or just surfing the internet at home, you can rest easy knowing that you are protected. Now, here's the best part. NordVPN is super easy to use. With a click of a button, you can connect to the fastest servers available so that you can have lightning fast internet without sacrificing your security. As a bonus, with thousands of servers in over 100 plus countries, NordVPN allows you to access your favorite content from anywhere in the world. So if you want peace of mind while surfing the web, NordVPN has been kind enough to offer a special discount for only our viewers. Get NordVPN 2-year plan plus 4 months extra. A special discount not found anywhere else. Click on the link that you see here on the screen down in the description or in the pinned comment. Plus, it's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. Click down in the description and get the link below and get this special offer from NordVPN and get started today. But wait a minute, what about the good police officers out there that are going to use facial recognition software and then they're going to do everything they can to corroborate that result so that they're making a proper arrest? Here's the problem. If you go and you take a look at all the manuals that are out there, and almost every police department is not actually addressing what is sufficient corroborating evidence. In other words, what might be sufficient corroboration for you might be completely different for someone else. There is no objective standard, so it's based upon the individual opinion of each officer. It's no surprise that with very little training, police officers are obtaining warrants to arrest people based upon information that is really not independent from the facial recognition software match. For example, in Willie Allen Lynch's case, the undercover officers who then requested the facial recognition search got the results back and then decided that they themselves would act as the corroborating witnesses. They looked at the result from the facial recognition software search and it came back to them and they go, hey, that's the same guy. They believed that was corroborating evidence and they needed nothing else. In fact, those same officers pulled a prior mugshot of Willie and they looked at it and compared it to the facial recognition software result and they said, oh, this has got to be the same guy. He must be the seller. Let's go arrest him. Now think about how lazy these officers were. In that particular case, there were independent witnesses that were made aware that a facial recognition software search came back, and at no time did those officers take the time to sit down with those independent witnesses and show them the actual facial recognition search hit, as well as a separate independent photo array, so that way they'd be able to compare it to multiple different people so that they made sure Willie was the right guy. Instead of protecting this whole process from error by leaving it wide open for the police to determine what is sufficient corroborating evidence, it has actually insulated the entire process where now there are innocent people being arrested because of lazy facial recognition software work by the police. And because the police are labeling facial recognition software leads as merely an investigative tool and not the basis for probable cause, they are not disclosing to either the judge they obtained the warrant from or from the defense attorney who they're now bringing the charges against this person and has counsel. They're not disclosing to them that the basis for their probable cause was based off this investigative lead from facial recognition software. They've essentially created this veil where they feel like they don't have to disclose this information and they believe it's not required under Brady versus Maryland. Imagine being wrongfully arrested and your identity is based upon a so-called photo match where the police never actually tell your lawyer that the whole basis for this was based on facial recognition software, so you're not even able to contest it or argue that it's unreliable because the actual state failed to inform you of it, all under the guise that it's merely an investigative lead. Here's the crazy part. There have been many people wrongfully arrested under facial recognition software evidence alone. And judges have had no problem signing off on probable cause warrants, even though that is not supposed to be solely the basis for probable cause. So we already know that multiple judges across many jurisdictions have signed off on arrest warrants based upon nothing other than facial recognition software evidence, even though we know how unreliable it is. So it's really only a matter of time before a prosecutor chooses to stand up in court and take facial recognition software, even though we all know it's scientifically unreliable, and attempt to use it as substantive evidence to convict someone by establishing identity in court. If this goes into effect where a judge actually accepts this and claims it's scientifically reliable, imagine now it's the Wild West for the police. They have no standards to establish what actual corroboration is. They could use themselves. They could just look at it and claim that's sufficient corroboration. And now you're going to open up the floodgates. Notice what's going on out there in social media now. It doesn't take much for someone to create a deep fake of you. They can go to any one of these, Hey Jen, they can go to all these other type of online providers and easily set up an AI avatar of you. And then what if they post something on there? And what if that is somehow tied to something that the police pull off that they believe is now tied to you being at the scene of a crime or you being involved in a crime, and they don't have to have any true independent corroboration? Understand how dangerous this is, how everyone's privacy rights and their rights under the law and Constitution are at risk. Courts must address this issue and also put limitations on the police to establish what sufficient corroboration is. So what happens next? The Supreme Court must finally take up this issue and once and for all rule that facial recognition software technology is unreliable and cannot be used in any capacity in criminal investigations, particularly when you understand how artificial intelligence can make it so easy for someone to clone who you are and put you at the scene of something you had nothing to do with. Not to mention, we've already established this technology is unreliable, and there are no safeguards to prevent the error because the actual technology is inherently unreliable. You combine that with you have to have a police officer verify that technology in order for it to be corroborated, and there's no standard for what level of corroboration is needed in order to be fair and constitutional. Despite everything we've discussed here today, police continue to defend the use of this technology because it makes their life easier. In fact, I mentioned this earlier, but the founder of Clearview AI, essentially what he has done is made this job very easy for the police. He's taken all of these billions of images, he served them up to the police. No warrant required, privacy violated for millions and millions of Americans. And so they can just feed it into this machine and it spits something out. And then the police believe it almost every single time. When you couple this with the fact that police are very poor, just like all witnesses are very poor, at making positive identifications with faces they don't recognize, it's a recipe for disaster. In fact, this reminds me of a recent case, a man by the name Sidney Holmes. He spent more than 30 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. In fact, when you look at it, he was exonerated after prosecutors determined that he was misidentified by a witness in a lineup. And according to the Innocence Project, eyewitness misidentifications is the leading cause of wrongful convictions in America. So what can be done here? Here are the 4 critical steps you need to take and what you can do to exercise your rights. Number 1, the United States Supreme Court must rule on the use of this technology and find that it violates our 4th Amendment rights. Otherwise, we will continue to see this technology abused by law enforcement. Number 2, we must demand transparency. The police should be required to disclose when facial recognition technology is being used in an investigation so that it can be challenged in court by the defense. Number 3, we must push for oversight. Legislation must set strict guidelines on how and when this technology can be used, and we must put very specific requirements on police as to what is substantial corroboration. And finally, number 4, know your rights. If you're ever arrested, exercise your right to remain silent and your right to an attorney. Demand your attorney to file discovery motions and Brady motions demanding to know if facial recognition played a role in your arrest. You have the right to challenge unreliable evidence. And finally, how can you protect your privacy? Number 1, think before you post. The moment you share anything at all on a social media platform, it's no longer yours. If you're not comfortable with someone else using it or trying to twist it against you, maybe it's better to not post. Number 2, adjust your privacy settings. Lock down your settings on your social media. Be careful who you allow in as a friend and make sure you're really safeguarding exactly what information you share through any private instant messaging or any other type of posts through any platform. And finally, exercise your rights. If a police officer ever shows up and starts asking you questions about some type of post they saw online and they want to know exactly what you meant by something, or if they're trying to say, do you know this man that I see you standing next to in this picture? If anything like that were to ever happen, can I tell you they're not there because they're interested in your social media profile. They're there in order to try to tie you investigatively as being either some type of witness or maybe even the perpetrator in a crime. So you should immediately exercise your rights. You should say, officer, I exercise my right to remain silent. I will only answer questions if my lawyer is present. and then remain silent. Facial recognition technology is powerful, but without accountability, it's dangerous. It has already been shown to ruin lives, to erode our privacy, and if we allow it to continue to be used as an investigative tool, it will ruin any trust in the criminal justice system. Speaking of powerful technology, did you know that cops have technology that allow them to see through the walls of your home to spy on you? Check out this next video where I break it all down and the one step you can take right now to protect yourself. See you over there.